Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be exploring the ideas of a guy named Eric Hufschmid.
Okay.
And, he's a social critic with kind of some radical views about how to modernize society.
Right.
So we're going to be diving into his audio recording from December 7th, 2008.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, a little while back, but his ideas are actually, surprisingly relevant to conversations that we're having today.
Yeah, I think going back and looking at what people were saying, 10, 15, 20 years ago really can inform our understanding of where we are today and kind of how we got here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too because he doesn't just critique the way things are, he actually offers solutions.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
he's not just doom and gloom.
Yeah. So it's not just a rant. It's like he really has this almost like engineer-like approach where he looks at society as if, it were a machine that could be redesigned.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and right from the start, he uses the 2008 auto industry bailout as an example to illustrate what he calls the incompetence argument.
Oh, okay. The incompetence argument.
Yeah, and basically what he's saying is that by bailing out failing companies, we're actually rewarding bad decisions.
Hmm.
And we're kind of preventing the natural process of, what they call creative destruction that can actually lead to progress.
So it's like we're propping up these businesses that maybe should be failing, allowing a market to correct itself, and then new innovation can come in.
Yeah, exactly. And he even goes so far as to ask, like, should we even let failing businesses fail?
That's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that's still, sparking debate today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, are we just delaying the inevitable? Are we creating these zombie companies that are just going to limp along and never really be able to compete?
Yeah, are we putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone,
Oh,
basically?
exactly. Yeah, and he connects this to a deeper issue, I think, which is fear,
Okay.
and specifically the fear of job loss.
Yeah.
He argues that this fear keeps people stuck in jobs they hate, or even in situations that are like actually unhealthy, and it prevents us from really innovating and making the kind of changes we need to make to to really address society's challenges.
Yeah, I mean, he uses this really vivid example to illustrate this point. He talks about these workers in China who are roasting circuit boards over open flames
Oh, wow.
to recycle the components.
Wow.
And they're doing this, at great risk to their own health for very little income because they're terrified of losing their jobs.
It's like their options are so limited that they have to choose between, their health and their livelihood.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, have you ever felt that kind of pressure, that fear of, if I lose this job, what am I going to do?
I think most of us can relate to that on some level, right? Like
Yeah.
the anxiety of losing your job, your income, your security.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Hufschmid is arguing is that this fear isn't just an individual thing. Like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
actually built into the fabric of our economic system.
Okay.
And he suggests that this actually rewards a certain type of personality.
Interesting. Okay.
Hey, someone who prioritizes short-term gain.
Ruthless competition over, long-term thinking
Right.
and social responsibility.
Okay.
And he actually calls this the crude personality.
The crude personality.
Yeah. So instead of, fostering collaboration and innovation, we're kind of incentivizing cutthroat tactics and a focus on profit above all else.
Yeah, and he actually uses this comparison between two hypothetical factory owners to kind of drive this point home.
Right.
You've got one factory owner who, cares about aesthetics and community. He wants his factory to be, a pleasant place to work, a positive contribution to the city.
Right.
And then you have the other owner who's purely profit-driven, zero concern for anything beyond just, the bottom line.
Okay.
And Hufschmid suggests that, unfortunately, like, our system often rewards that second type.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that in terms of how we design cities. Like,
Yeah.
we often prioritize industrial zones
Right.
over, more aesthetically pleasing areas.
Function over form. Yeah, exactly. And this leads him to challenge another kind of deeply ingrained belief,
Right.
which is that financial success equals value.
Mm,
He uses examples like Howard Stern Opie and Anthony MTV.
interesting.
These people are wildly profitable,
Right.
but are they actually contributing positively to society?
That's a really good question. Yeah.
Yeah, and he actually uses this kind of shocking anecdote about Opie and Anthony making an intern drink vomit to highlight his point.
Wow. Okay.
It's really jarring. It's like, okay, so just because you're successful financially,
Mm.
does that automatically mean you're a good person or that you're, contributing good things to the world?
Yeah, it really makes you think about, the businesses we support,
Yeah.
the values they represent. What are we actually, propping up.
What businesses come to mind for you when you think about that? Like profitable, but potentially harmful?
Yeah, that's a good question to sit with for a minute.
Yeah, and he doesn't shy away from tackling these kind of untouchable subjects like Christmas.
Okay. The holidays. Yeah, what he calls the Christmas conundrum.
Oh, okay.
Where he sees it as this frenzy of consumerism
Right.
driven more by economic pressure and marketing
Yeah.
than genuine human connection.
Hmm.
And it's like we're all just on autopilot buying things we don't need to impress people we don't even care about.
Yeah. Just going through the motions, kind of.
Yeah, and he highlights this irony of these advanced nations
Mm-hmm.
anxiously waiting to see if Americans are going to buy enough stuff
Right.
to keep their economies afloat.
Wow.
It's a pretty stark picture of how interconnected and potentially unsustainable our global economy is.
Yeah, it really is. It makes you think about, how we approach these holidays, what actually matters.
Yeah. Is there a way to reclaim the spirit of the occasion
Right.
without getting caught up in all the consumerism?
A good question.
Yeah, and all of these examples that he brings up lead to this kind of central argument,
Okay.
which is that our current economic system, with its focus on profit above all else.
It's actually hindering progress.
Oh, so it's actually holding this back.
Yeah, and he uses these very practical examples. He talks about his frustrations with trying to improve water heater designs or
Okay.
refrigerator designs. And he has this story about how he made his own water heater more efficient with a simple modification. But there's no market incentive for this kind of innovation.
Right, because it's not going to make anybody more money.
Exactly. And he actually sketched out a refrigerator design
Back.
where the cooling coils would be exposed to outside air during cold weather
Oh, that's interesting.
and drastically reduce energy use.
Hmm.
But he argues that manufacturers would resist this kind of change because it would disrupt their production models and their profit margins.
So even if we have these good ideas,
Yeah.
the system itself is kind of resistant to change?
Yeah. It's like we're stuck in a rut, And that brings us to a key question for you, the listener.
Okay, shoot.
What innovations do you see being stifled by the current system? What are we missing out on because of these outdated ways of doing things?
I like that.
Yeah, so we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll explore some of the solutions that Hufschmid proposes because he actually has some really interesting ideas about how we could do things differently.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. It's a question worth, sitting with for a while.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because, Hufschmid doesn't just point out the problems.
Right.
He offers some solutions.
Okay.
And some of them are pretty radical. Like he talks about building entirely new cities from scratch.
What, like just pick a spot on a map and start building?
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
And I know it sounds crazy, right?
That sounds incredibly ambitious.
Yeah, like something out of science fiction.
Right.
But he actually argues that it's not as far-fetched as it might seem.
Okay.
He points out that American construction crews already build the equivalent of a large city every year. It's just a matter of, coordinating those efforts and focusing on creating something truly innovative.
So instead of just, sprawling suburbs and unplanned development,
Yeah.
we could be creating these like planned cities
Yeah.
that are really optimized for efficiency, walkability, green spaces, community.
Exactly. Designed with people in mind, not just cars and commerce.
Right.
And this is where his idea for a revolutionary transportation system comes in.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about this. The track-bound electric vehicles.
Yes.
It's like a super efficient, automated version of public transit.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine these narrow tracks,
Okay.
not much wider than the tires of a car. And there's an electrical cable running alongside to power the vehicles.
Okay.
And the vehicles themselves wouldn't be owned individually.
Right.
They'd be more like taxis, available on demand.
Oh, so like through an app or something.
Yeah, exactly. So you just request a car and it arrives at your doorstep.
Wow. So no more traffic jams, no more searching for parking.
No more car payments.
No more car maintenance.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that sounds pretty utopian.
Yeah, and because the tracks are so narrow, they could be integrated into existing cities without major disruption. They could even run underground like a futuristic subway system.
It's kind of like a hybrid between like a personal rapid transit system and a traditional subway.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all powered by electricity,
Okay.
aligning with his vision of a more sustainable society.
And, he even points out that this would be really beneficial for colder climates
How so?
because the tracks could be easily cleared of snow and ice.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, so no more, shoveling your car out of a snowdrift.
Or scraping ice off your windshield.
Yeah, sign me up for that.
Yeah, it seems like he's really thought of everything.
He's a visionary thinker, that's for sure.
Yeah, and Beyond just the technological aspects, he
Right.
also challenges us to rethink our relationship with material possessions.
Okay.
He argues that owning fewer things can actually simplify our lives and free up resources for more meaningful pursuits.
It's like that minimalist philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see how that ties into his vision for these new cities.
Yeah.
Like if nobody owns a car, for example,
Right.
it eliminates the burdens of maintenance storage insurance.
It's like a whole system designed around,
Yeah.
sharing and using resources efficiently.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
a shift away from our current consumerist culture.
Right. We're constantly being told to buy more stuff.
Yeah, and he believes that by letting go of this need to possess,
Mm.
we can create a more equitable and sustainable society.
That's a pretty radical idea.
Yeah, it is, but I think it's worth considering.
I think so too.
And it ties into this broader philosophy that he talks about of designing a society for respectable people
Okay.
rather than catering to the worst behaved among us.
What does he mean by that?
Well, he believes that a lot of our systems are actually designed to prevent the worst case scenarios,
Okay.
which ends up creating a lot of unnecessary complexity and bureaucracy.
Okay. I can see that.
Like, for example, we have these complicated security systems,
Right.
billing systems, metering systems,
Yeah.
all designed to prevent theft or fraud.
Yeah. To catch the bad guys.
But what if we created a society based on trust,
Okay.
where those measures weren't even necessary?
Hmm. That's a really interesting idea, but is it realistic?
I mean, that's the question, right?
Yeah. Can we really expect people to behave responsibly without these external controls?
That's what Hufschmid is asking.
Yeah.
And he believes that if we can find enough like-minded individuals,
Correct.
people who are genuinely committed to creating a better world, then yes, it is possible.
So it's about finding that critical mass of people who are ready for a different way of doing things.
Exactly. And he urges us to ignore the naysayers, to focus on building that better future one step at a time.
That's a message of hope amidst all the, critique and doom and gloom.
Yeah, and it's empowering to think that we actually have the ability to shape our own destiny,
Right.
even if it means starting from scratch.
So where do we begin?
Yeah, how do we move from these grand ideas
Right.
to concrete action?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And Hufschmid argues that the first step is a shift in our mindset.
Yeah.
We need to kind of let go of these outdated ideas and really embrace the possibility of creating something entirely new.
Yeah, he's talking about a pretty radical departure from the way we do things now. It's not just about tweaking the system.
Right.
It's about questioning the very foundation of our society.
Exactly. And he believes that a lot of our current systems are based on these outdated assumptions about human nature.
Okay.
And the role of government. He even suggests that the American Constitution
Well,
is a crude document that should be discarded in favor of something,
well,
more
right.
relevant to the challenges we face today.
So it's we need to completely rethink our social, economic, political system.
Yeah, from the ground up.
Wow.
He challenges us to question everything,
Mm.
to never settle for the status quo, to always strive for something better.
So it's not just about building new cities and transportation systems. Right.
It's about creating a new paradigm.
Exists a new way of thinking about what society could be.
And this brings us back to the individuals who will drive this change.
Okay.
Hufschmid makes a distinction between what he calls talking monkeys
Right.
and advanced humans.
Yeah. The talking monkeys are driven by these primal desires, short-term thinking.
Right.
And then the advanced humans are the ones who can see beyond the immediate and actually work toward a better future.
He doesn't mince words.
No, he doesn't. It's a very provocative way of framing this challenge.
Yeah, it's like we need to evolve as a species to create a truly sustainable and just society.
It's a challenge that goes beyond any particular policy or technology.
Right.
It's about who we are as human beings and what we're capable of.
And that brings us to a question for you, the listener.
Okay.
Where do you see yourself in this spectrum?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Are you a talking monkey, content with the status quo?
Right.
Or are you an advanced human striving for something more? It's a question worth asking ourselves, I think.
It can be uncomfortable,
Yeah,
but I think it's important.
absolutely. And Hufschmid emphasizes that we're not alone in this.
Okay.
He believes there are many advanced humans out there working quietly to make a difference.
Yeah.
The challenge is to find each other, connect, collaborate,
Right.
and build that critical mass of individuals who are committed to creating a better world.
So it's not about waiting for some grand revolution.
Right.
It's about taking action in our own lives.
Yeah, in our own communities, connecting with others who share that vision.
And he warns against falling into the trap of despair or cynicism.
Yeah, it's easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of the problems.
Yeah.
But he really urges us to stay positive,
Okay.
focus on the possibilities, and never give up hope.
It's a good reminder
Yeah.
that even small actions can have a ripple effect. If
Yeah.
each of us does what we can,
Yeah.
collectively we can make a real difference.
And ultimately, that's what Hufschmid's message is all about. It's about empowering individuals to take ownership of their future and to work together to create a society that reflects our highest values.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Eric Hufschmid's ideas,
Yeah,
we're left with a lot to think about.
for sure.
He challenges us to question everything, to embrace these radical solutions,
Right.
and to believe in the power of human ingenuity to create a better world.
It's a provocative message,
It is.
but it's also hopeful.
Yeah,
He reminds us that the future isn't predetermined. It's something that we create.
through our choices and actions.
Exactly. And, if we accept his premise that simply trying to reform our existing systems is futile,
Right.
it raises a really profound question. What would it actually look like to start over?
To build a new society from the ground up.
Yeah, what kind of world would we create if we had a chance to begin anew?
It's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely. Well,
I-
thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, we hope it sparked some new ideas and inspired you to think differently about the possibilities for positive change.